Okay, let's start with the most important question, I suppose. Who are you voting for and why?
Yes, so I actually already voted. I voted for Joe Biden. I look as the vote as a vote to get Trump out. I don't necessarily support Joe Biden, but this is probably the biggest election in which one has to choose the lesser of two evils. So, yeah, my vote for Joe Biden is just to get Trump out of office because he is unfit to lead this country.
Fair enough. I suppose the next one kind of links nicely to this, but do you think Donald Trump is a racist? I mean, he said last week that nobody has done more for the blacks than him since Abraham Lincoln. Would you agree with that statement? And do you think Donald Trump is a racist, or do you think that maybe he's just an old man who has old-fashioned views?
Yeah, definitely believe um, he's a racist. More specifically, he is a white supremacist. Um, I think a lot of his rhetoric is just because he's ignorant and he's out of touch. So he could be involuntarily a racist, if that makes any sense. Just because of his preconceived notions about Black Americans and the stereotypes. I know he always likes to point to the unemployment rate, but he doesn't understand at all because of his ego trip. His inflammatory statements has an effect on people. Besides saying of what he's done for Americans, specifically Black Americans, even if he says he's done better than Abraham Lincoln. I mean, we can go back to when he said the thing he said about Charlottesville, about there was very fine people on both sides. That was inflammatory. You can talk. We can talk about the time when he said, "When the looting starts, the shooting starts." That was also inflammatory. I mean, the list goes on. We can talk about it escapes my mind now, but yeah, even in the first debate when he was telling the Proud Boys to stand back and stand by. I mean, these things are something that only a white supremacist can say without regard. So we definitely believe he's a racist.
Have you ever fallen out with somebody who is a Trump supporter? Would you, if I said to you that I support Donald Trump, how would that make you feel? And would you think less of that person, or do you just think that's politics and it's different?
Um, you know, yeah, with Trump, it really just shows a whole different side. It's a whole different ball game because he's not your traditional politician. So if I was to speak to somebody that says uh, they support Donald Trump, I would really want to know why, and it would change my views about you. Now I do. I don't know any Trump supporters that are friends personally, but I have heard from people that say they do support him, and a majority of the time they're one issue voters. So they're able to just ignore, like the aforementioned inflammatory things that he says and the racist things that he does, and just how he's handled the office haphazardly. They understand that and they disagree with that, but because of the one issue that is near and dear to their heart, that's why they want to vote for Trump. But and even with this whole coronavirus pandemic, the way he handled it as well, with no plan in place, and have allowed over 200,000 Americans to die. Uh, you know that that is just something that just I feel like cannot be overlooked, no matter what your issues are. I mean, when there's just like total disregard for human life, and for you to just be so dismissive about it, I would really want to know why a person would want to overlook that and still vote for him. Now, would that change the dynamic of a friendship with that person because they support Trump? I absolutely believe so. I would want to know, okay, what else do you support, and how do you feel about the plight of minorities, the plight of Black people, what they've gone through for everything that happened this summer with the tragic deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and how him and his administration responded to that. How he views the Black Lives Matter, how he paints a broad stroke as to think they're a movement that just wants to vandalize and loot, when we know clearly with the protest that's only a small percentage of people, really, in my opinion, people that have been sent out to sow discord, to try to paint a picture of what peaceful protesters are doing. I mean, again, the list goes on. So, I would want to go into a deeper conversation to understand why one would actually support Donald Trump.
Do you feel like it's almost you've had many steps forward over the years, and if you think about from like the 1960s, it feels like America has become a place that was nearly getting towards the central equal point, and then it feels like it's went like this and moved away over the last 4 years. It feels like a big backward step where you go from the first black
Sure.
president with Obama to Donald Trump. That seems like massive polar opposites.
In a way, I can sort of agree with you. It's like it's kind of a one step forward but two steps back. I can kind of agree with that statement, but at the same time, even when Obama was in office, racism didn't cease to exist. You know, in some ways, it's actually, if there is one positive thing, even if I could say that about Trump being in office, is that people can clearly see for themselves finally that yes, racism still exists in this country. Um, for a lot of, especially Black Americans, I mean, we haven't had the same opportunities as a lot of our white counterparts. Um, it. I will admit, there are some things in which, okay, we're making some steps forward, or we're finally get to a place, but as you can see it, like I said, with the tragic death of George Floyd, um, that was like the first time Americans as a whole, I felt like, are finally seeing, what is happening in our communities. For some people, it was like the light bulb just went off. But it's like this has been happening. I mean, what about Mike Brown and Trayvon Martin and Philando Castile and Terrence Crutcher? I mean, the list goes on. Alton Sterling. I mean, this has been going on. You know what I mean? So uh, for the thought of, like, we're kind of moving forward and he's kind of taking a step back, it's like, yeah, I can see that, but at the same time, it's just more of a, like, okay, we're finally pulling back the layer. And now for the first time, especially with the movements going on and people like Black Lives Matter, like being recognized on a global scale, you know, I feel like we're some people have pledged to say, okay, we're actually going to work towards a better America. We're actually going to move forward in a little bit, because, when I hear that, because it kind of reminds me of Trump saying, this make America great again. Like, this whole thought is like, well, especially for Black people, America's never been great. We're still under a lot of oppression. Just because we're not under physical shackles and chains, that doesn't remove the metaphorical shackles and chains that we go through in the workplace, that we go through, in our social settings. Walking down the street in the grocery, it doesn't matter where we're at. We can still feel those tinges of those racism, of racism. So, him, being in office was kind of a good thing, because it peeled the layer back even more and exposed it for the world to see. And so hopefully, from this year forward, we can start moving toward a better America.
And we touched on this one before about the election and whether or not it's going to be fair, and Trump kind of talking up voter tampering and the fraud that's likely to happen. Are you worried about this election being fair? Do you think that this is going to be a truly democratic election?
Um, you know, I I worry a little bit because I just I'm not sure what tampering would happen. Just because of from what I'm reading and hearing is that you know the voter turnout is in record numbers. I mean, we've had way more early voters than we did in the last election. So I'm not too worried about the turnout because from the polls are saying that it's really really close, especially actually in the state of Georgia. It's been historically a Republican state. And for the first time, it's really looking like it's going to be close. I think Trump is only leading by 1 or 2 percentage points. So, I mean, to me, I believe, tampering aside, it should be fair. I mean, seeing that, you know, for everywhere you went, 4 years ago, people thought Hillary, had the election in the bag, and as you can see, that wasn't the case. So, I would hope it's fair, and I would hope, that everything is done according to law for sure.
And what do you like most about Joe Biden? You said that you're not necessarily voting for him because of all his wonderful policies, but is there anything that
Sure.
you like about Joe Biden? Are there particular things that appeal to you, and are there things that don't appeal to you about him?
Quite simply for me, Joe Biden is not Donald Trump. He is, I mean, for a lot of people, he's familiar because, he was the vice president of Barack Obama. I if I had to say one thing that I like, I mean, he represents a sense of normalcy and stability to the office of the president. But I don't want anyone to get it wrong. I am fully prepared to vote against him in 4 years if he doesn't, bring about the necessary change that is needed for this country, especially as it deals with me as a young black man in America. Uh, he, I've heard some of the things he says along with his Vice President Harris as well. Um, you know, they they have some policies that I agree with, some that I don't. But like I said, voted for him just so Trump could be out of office.
So, what do you think happens if Donald Trump wins the election? Because I've certainly heard lots of people say that um, the more, certainly if it's an election like last time where Hillary actually had the more votes, but the way the system
Uh,
works, they didn't win. Do you think it's possible that
Electoral.
you could see civil unrest, rioting? Do you think that we're at that point now whereby if Trump maintains the presidency for another 4 years, where we could see people taking to the streets? Do you think that's likely, or do you think people will accept the result?
Honestly, I actually don't know. I'm actually more worried of civil unrest should Biden win.
Okay.
I believe that Trump's base is more aggressive, more privileged, and they have no regard. I mean, I was just reading. Joe Biden's actually here in Georgia today for a last ditch campaign, and you have Trump supporters riding by where Joe Biden is screaming Trump 2020. I mean, like they are that aggressive. You know what I mean? So I would be more fearful of Biden winning and for there to be civil unrest. Should Trump win, I mean, we would have, so we'll definitely, be subdued and upset just like we were 4 years ago, but nowhere near to the level of, some of the Trump supporters, because again, a majority of these people I would like to believe are the ones that were in the streets, this summer protesting for the wrongful deaths of innocent Americans. So, absolutely, the problems will arise from the other side. So, but we'll just have to see.